guys. Let's get started. And get more pizza because there's tons, which is awesome. All right. Thanks for coming along. Cool. There's a few people who were probably here 2 years ago when I did this talk for the first time, and that's kind of a little bit awkward because you're going to see the same slides and the same stuff as I did last time, but hopefully there's a few newer pilots who this will make some sense to. So, why are we talking about this? We, like probably an awful lot of the newer pilots here, I got really into paragliding, and it was that whole kind of like, I'm going to buy lightweight kit and I can go and hike up big mountains and fly down in cool places, and then you start doing that, and at some point I realised that maybe I needed to know a little bit more about what I was doing before actually just jumping off a big hill, and it wasn't quite as simple as I thought. I'm actually going to cover a few little things in here, but one of the other reasons for this is Theo and I are gradually putting some of these hike and fly locations up on the club website. So it's going to be like a mini, not a full database, but like a good selection of starting options for people to consider going to. It's the start of winter. We've got we're getting very light thermals these days. A few people flew gondola at the weekend, got some nice kind of gentler climbs or gentler thermals, which is nice, but we don't have the big rowdy XC conditions. So most of the time, now it's colder and there's a lot less solar heating. We're going to be hiking up and then just gliding back down to the bottom, which is kind of cool. It's nice to get out. There's some beautiful hikes as well, so it's just even more fun to do it with 20 kilos on the back. There's a few other things that we need to be aware of when we go up into the mountains. So weather conditions we're going to talk about. We'll talk about communications, which is effectively common sense mountain skills. Some pre-flight check stuff and odds and ends of flying skills, and then I'm going to go through a few suggestions of places to go for hike and flies. So, weather. God, really, did I do? I could have done all of these in one slide. There's lots and lots of information online now, and it's pretty accurate generally. I'm fortunate that the two guys who went on a hike and fly today aren't here, just because I really wanted to ask them whether the weather forecast was the same as what they experienced on top of Mount Oxford. There's some really, really simple ones. Windy, I'm sure you've all seen and used Windy quite a lot. It's a really nice graphical interface. It's pretty obvious what's going on, and you can zoom in and look at the isobars and whether there's clouds. It'll show you overdevelopment fairly easily as well. And it gives us, from a hike and fly perspective, it gives us a really good indication of whether it's going to be light enough for an easy hike and fly. For hike and fly here, I'm looking for very light winds. So what did I say? Nothing to 10 to 12 k an hour. So on windy, that is blue or purple. As soon as you get into the light blue or greeny colours, it can be more challenging. It's not a don't go, but it's a good reason to pay attention. Windy also does this kind of, what's the wind at ground level? And then, I don't know if you've seen the little altitude thing, so you can check what the wind's doing at different heights. Check the wind height at launch and a little bit above launch. So don't just rely on that ground level, it can be a bit misleading. Other weather stuff is kind of nowcasting. So you've done your checks when you were planning to go. When you head out, have a look at what's actually happening. Does it match what you expected on the forecast? As you're hiking up, is the wind coming from the direction you were expecting to? If you're hiking up on the back side, like if the track is on the back side of the hill, you're probably hiding in the lee from the wind. So if you're feeling wind on your back and you're going to launch off the other side, then that could be a problem on the way up. In a lot of cases, if you can hike to the top, do. Even if the launch is like 50 metres or 100 metres below, it's well worth hiking up to the top and go, is the real wind speed being masked by something else, that because you're tucked in behind a ridge or something? So drop your bags at launch, run up the last little bit and see what it's like. Wind around terrain. What did I even write there? Yeah, watch out for lee and obstacles. So yeah, spurs, trees, some of the peaks around here, and also Mount 5 to some extent. They've got fairly big plantations on them, and those trees are growing a lot quicker than we might like, so that starts to become a bit of an issue on some of the launches if you're launching behind or next to tall stands of trees. And also scale out, so look at the bigger picture, look at where the wind's coming from, or where the wind a couple of kilometres up is coming from, and how that's going to affect local areas. We get nice sheltered spots, so you might be able to kind of sneak a little flight in, what a friend of mine calls a doggy door. So like, oh, it'll be fine at 11, but by 11:30 it's blown out. You know, that's maybe pushing your luck a bit. So, yeah, always be prepared to walk down. If you absolutely have to fly, you're possibly taking more of a risk than you should be. So I thought, seeing as we've done this, I thought I'd show you Saturday. So this was Windy's forecast for Canterbury yesterday, looking at Saturday at midday. So this looked pretty good yesterday. And as you can see, there's a little bit of southerly wind down here, but pretty much across all of Canterbury, it's light enough, pretty much no wind, all the way up to 2,000 metres. And I thought, oh, sweet, that's great. We can actually plan a hike and fly for Saturday. This is what it looks like today. So same time, just 24 hours later. It's not impossible to go for a fly, but as soon as I start seeing this green, this is at ground level, that's more of a sign for concern. The better pilots with faster wings will probably be able to make it work better. There's also this really cool, see this kind of blue-purple line through there? That's convergence. So, which is, God, I'm in the wrong place. So this is Torless Range, just here. That's Mount Hutt. So there is actually a launch at Canterbury View at Mount Hutt, so you can drive up to that and do shuttle runs potentially. Just don't land in the deer paddocks. So the convergence is going to be calm winds, but it's because there's a lot more wind either side of that. So if that convergence sets up in a different place, and if you look on Windy, maybe we'll do that at the end of the talk, you'll see the convergence line moving either inland as the sea breeze pushes in or drifting out. So you might be in a nice calm area of wind and then it suddenly picks up. And that's the wind at 2,000 metres. So generally norwesterly and quite a lot more windy, especially through that little gap between Mount Hutt and the Torless. 2,000 metres is ridge height at the Craig Bends. And then at 5 o'clock, we're getting over development. So this is the clouds view, this one, on Windy. So by 5 o'clock, what this is showing me is that there's cloud building. It looks like it's going to overdevelop, which is the touching point on the RASP graph on the right there. We're seeing a really good lapse rate straight up into the cloud and beyond. So that's sort of suggesting to me that you don't really want to be still there at 5 o'clock. But it's something to be aware of if you do go for a hike. We're expecting it to be nice and blue skies, and when you start to see clouds developing, it's probably going to fill in and start to overdevelop. Make sense? Cool. So light winds, blue and purple and windy. No questions so far? Thanks. Cons. This is pretty simple. Check access before you go. There are lots of private land here. There are a couple of really useful websites that show public conservation land. I'll try and put some links through on the WhatsApp chat to those. But if you're going to go for a hike, make sure you're actually allowed to go there. We can legally we can land anywhere because we're a glider, but that doesn't really help farmers and people respecting the sport. So keep an eye out on where you're going and make sure that you've got authority to go. For example, the little river site, we have to bring the landowners there to use that site. It's just effectively a courtesy. But check your access permissions and check your landing options. If you can go in a group, go with some people who are a bit more experienced. I know that's happened quite a lot this summer. We've had some newer pilots coming out with more experienced people, and that's great. That makes it a lot easier if someone else is there to kind of go, maybe the conditions aren't so great, or you'll be fine. Take off early. Use radios. We use this club channel 40. I think there's some talk from NZHGPA about trying to set up national radio channels, which is going to be kind of cool, like they have in Australia. So more of a common established frequency, which would be really useful. If you've got satellite trackers, especially if you're going off on your own, make sure you've got something like an inReach so that you've got comms and someone is looking at your track log and keeping an eye on you. When I do go off, I let my partner know, try and flicker a text and say I'm going to launch about 12:30, and we have a general rule that if my inReach pings in the same place for an hour and it's not an obvious landing field, she'll call rescue services. So, because I haven't been able to for whatever reason. So, generally really useful if someone's keeping an eye on what you're doing. And tell someone what you're doing. Cool. This is going to be a quick talk. I'm blitzing through this. If anyone's got questions, do ask anytime.
So do you on airband radios in certain areas?
In some areas, yeah. So if you're flying in, on the main one that we have is Mount Cook, MBZ. So anyone flying in that kind of Sealy Tarns, Glenn might know a little bit more about this. Anyway, around Sealy Tarns down to Whitehorse campsite, you need an airband radio. You can get your license for that. I think it's like $10. There's a few people who do airband licensing. No. There's a few people who will do that license for you, your ARO certification. I don't have one. I've done my certification and then haven't used one for like 3 years. So most places we don't need it. There is one spot, which I'll talk about in a minute, where you do need it, or you should use an airband, or you should just go a different way. Have you flown with airband?
I've got one, but I've never used it. I've lent it to a lot of people. But
oh, awesome. That's good to know. That's right.
Actually, just on comms, has anybody had experience using the satellite off your phone recently? Yeah, or some of the newer Android ones as well.
I tried it on when I was in like Mount Cook area.
Yeah.
And I tried to call the police just because there was bad driving, and it didn't go through.
Didn't work.
No.
That's interesting.
And it was saying like the satellite option was there, but it wasn't coming through.
Oh, okay.
I think it's Kickstarter at this point.
It is, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
That might be way to work.
Yeah, there was no messaging, like messages or anything.
No, I'm just wondering because it looks like it's going to become an option, obviously, but if it doesn't work.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting, isn't it, with the whole like crash detection stuff as well. So like I know some people, like cyclists, have used that kind of when your phone hits the ground, it'll automatically call emergency services. I know one of my friends had that happen when he had his bike propped up outside a cafe and it fell over. But yeah, it could be useful. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I did experience a bit of an issue with InReach comms a couple of years ago. We were flying into Craigieburns. There's me and one other guy. We're both on InReach. He landed. I flew over to some different range and ended up bombing out in the arse end of nowhere. And we were on InReach comms trying to coordinate travel to get back. And he jumped in his car, drove off, but didn't have his InReach on. So I was messaging him on his phone while he still had data comms. And then as soon as he left, I couldn't get hold of him. So like actually practicing and trying, like using this kit before you need it is a really useful, really good idea. Flight checks. And it's pretty important at tailors as well, and like especially when we're doing quite a lot of flights in a day, and you know you're doing touch and goes. It's really easy to forget to do something, or yeah, like go, oh, I do actually have a reserve handle. Maybe I should look at it once in a while. That sort of thing. When you're on a hike and fly, it's way more important because you've just walked up like 1,500 meters or something to a launch, and as soon as you take off, you're not going back to get a phone that you've left on launch or whatever it is, Jan. So, like, really, really double, triple check. Get a process that you're happy with, and make sure everything's right before you launch. It's more important because it's generally you're on steeper terrain. It might be harder to abort your launch. So checking that you clipped in properly, checking that your wings, your brakes aren't twisted when you launch, making sure that your vario and your radio and everything are where they're supposed to be and that they're turned on. Check your shoelaces are done up. Andra and I have we came up with this beers penalty concept. So like, if you have a major fuck up, fine. It doesn't, everyone's going to come and help. But if you like actually forget to turn your InReach on, or forget to do up your chest strap, or have some minor cock up on any point in your flight, that's a beer, and you have to own up to it. And it makes the minor checks a whole lot. There's a much higher consequence for getting them wrong, especially because you can fuck up a lot of things in one flight. Catch points. If you're new, the newer pilots here, maybe don't take a GoPro for the first few times you fly. Like we've had, I think, was it our safety officer a few years ago had an incident out at Allendale, had a collapse. Lines got wrapped around his GoPro, ended up having to throw his reserve, just flying locally. So it can happen to anyone, regardless of experience, but whilst you're a little newer, maybe hold off on the social media posting until later. The other thing, if you're using trekking poles and you've got sort of telescopic ones, they pack down quite a lot smaller if you take the end part of the trekking pole out. So you actually like dismantle the pole. They're packed down like 4 or 5 inches shorter, which can be really handy because then it'll fit in your harness.
If people aren't doing GoPros and you take a lot of photos in a flight, do you just recommend like just a small handheld in your thing, or?
Yeah, I quite like. Yeah, so I've got a mirrorless camera, but I started flying with one probably a couple of years earlier than I should have done, and in the end I realised that I was actually shitting myself and not taking any photos because I'm letting go of the controls. So it took me a couple of years to kind of go, yeah, actually I feel comfortable enough now to take photos whilst flying. A lot of people use their phones on tethers, it's fine. And on sleddies, on winter sleddies in calm air, chances are it's going to be okay, but the consequences are pretty high, so it's kind of your choice. Yeah, GoPro is a good one. GoPro on a chest mount, maybe it's less likely to catch on stuff. And also if you're using a climbing helmet or something like that, get some gaffer tape and tape up the head torch clips, because lines get caught on those as well. Any more questions on that stuff? What's we got here? Oh yeah, car keys. Yeah. There's a lot of sets of car keys at Taylor's. Yeah, the main point from this is like, you've hiked up a big hill, it's very easy to forget stuff, so just do one extra set of checks before you leave the ground.
Close all your zippers.
Yeah, once you've left the ground you probably can't just do a 360 and come in and land. Close all your zippers. So flying skills. So you've done your PG2, and there was a great, what was it? There's a really great quote in one of the paragliding books saying, I think they're talking about American licensing, and it says, P2 teaches you to launch and land unaided without inconveniencing anyone else on the way through. And it's like, it doesn't actually teach you how to fly. So once you've got your PG2, practice, do lots of ground handling. Make sure you're totally comfortable with your wings. And for me, the big one when I started doing hike and flies was I learned at Taylor's, and I just did reverse launches, and then I'm going up to big mountain sites where there is absolutely no wind, going, shit, I haven't done a forward launch since my fourth flight. And, actually practicing forward launches is a really useful thing to do, I think. A lot of the launches in Canterbury, we've got scree, all sorts of little scrubby plants, and these, what are they, Calmesia, the little flowers with sticky stems and stuff that are just designed for snagging your lines. So making sure that you can control your wing and that you're comfortable launching it's really good. And make sure that it's overhead. Was described to me a while ago, there's 3 phases of launches, and you can watch people at Taylor's not doing any of them. So bring the wing up and check that it's open. Control it and turn, so that's checking it so it doesn't overshoot, making sure that it's actually above your head, and then commit to your launch. And what you'll see at Taylor's quite often is people will pull the wing up, it'll get to here, and they'll turn and run. Or they'll duck under the lines to try and go quicker, and you kind of blur all those steps together. Often on the hike and flies, you are going to be doing a forward launch, so you need to be comfortable making sure that your wing's nicely inflated and over your head before you go.
Okay. On
Hey.
that note, for people who hate ground handling, I would recommend practicing a bunch of forwards just on no wind, just to remember what that feels like. And you go to Taylor's and it's always quite nice.
Yeah.
And you're probably not going to be forward launching into those conditions. And to feel what the wing feels like if it's gone wrong. So
If it's
go
got
off
a
center,
cravat
tuck a
on one
wingtip
corner.
in, see what it's like when you're forward in those conditions, because the wing will feel differently.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, and you can do that in your local park,
Yeah. Doesn't matter.
wherever.
I think the other thing to note on that is that when you're forward launching or in light winds is that it takes a while for your wing to come up to speed, and you drop quite quickly to begin with, and a number of times I've been caught out by launching where there's not actually enough drop in front of me to build up, and so you end up getting very close to the ground before you your wing picks up enough speed to swim away from it.
That's a good point about not getting into your harness too early as well. Like, yeah, if you
whereas at tailors, you've got a wind, you're pretty much lifting up from when you're standing.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
Whereas with a nil wind launch, you've really got to make sure you've got enough airspace to get your speed up.
Yeah, and a lot of the time we're doing light wind launches in Canterbury because there'll be a long, shallow glide over trees. So if you've got a nice wind to launch in, there's a pretty good chance you won't have the glide to make it to the landing, and you'll end up in the trees somewhere. I'm really sad that guys aren't here because Mount Oxford is a very long glide over an awful lot of trees. I really wanted to hear how they got on, and it's forecast light northerly today, so potentially they would have had a launch off the back and then cut round through the saddles. I'd love to hear how they got on. Right, landing assessment. There's another good one. So at Taylor's, you launch, you can be pretty confident that the wind's going to be coming from the sea across the landing field if you're going to bottom land, or if you're going to top land. It's pretty obvious where the wind is. If there is a little bit of wind, it's reasonably important to make sure that you land into wind. In nil wind conditions, you're going to be travelling at trim speed, so 30-something k an hour. If you go up 5 k an hour wind, all of a sudden you're doing 35 k an hour plus. So it makes enough of a difference to be worth landing the right way round. If you can, scout out the landing that you're intending to beforehand. Take some bog roll. And you put that up as a streamer, because even if it gets blown away, it's biodegradable. That's kind of useful. Or bits of ribbon or something that you know where it is to have a good indicator what the wind's going to be doing at landing. As the newer pilots here, you've got instruments or something? Cool. Getting an instrument that gives you airspeed as a bare minimum is really useful, because that will tell you which way the wind is, or ground speed, sorry. That'll tell you what direction the wind's going. You can do a gentle 360 and look at where you've drifted, or you can fly in one direction and look at your ground speed, and then do a 180, fly in that direction, look at your ground speed, and that'll tell you, which one's faster. You're going with the wind. So making sure you've got enough height to do a couple of these turns before you get close to the ground is really useful. Having said that, I've also done those things and then found that the wind's going the other way, like 50 metres above the ground, and all of a sudden you've picked the wrong thing. Wind direction assessment. Oops. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Spectators.
On takeoffs, where do you take off in the sense of you have a screen slope, you have tussock? How do you pick the best place?
Yeah. For me, I'm going to look for a spot that's into wind and clear of as few obstacles as possible. I don't know. If I can set up on nice grassy tussock, I'll do that over scree and rocks and scrub, but I don't know. I think it depends on
the wind's the more important one, actually.
Yeah.
If you can pop it up into a wind, like, say, taking off at pedals, the difference between being able to launch easily and not launch at all
cross
is only a few metres. They can be exactly the same in some of those simple mountain takeoffs.
Yeah, it definitely can. Theo?
Do you have any thoughts on how to choose your takeoff direction, location, topography-wise? Like, are we looking for big cliff?
Well,
or nice?
No, yeah. So, kind of like I was saying earlier, you're looking for places that are not. You look for obstacles that are going to cause rotor or put you in the lead. So, trying to avoid as many of those obvious things like blocks to the wind, so that what you're feeling on your wing is as close to the synoptic wind as you can get, and finding a direction that's into wind. If there's lots of snaggy trees and shrubs and things, and you've got a little bit of wind, it's very easy to bring the wing up. You can sit it gently on top of all of this stuff. What can be kind of awkward is when you fluff your first launch and then you kind of walk back up and do a half-hearted job of setting out the second time, which makes it more likely to snag, and then you start getting a bit flustered and actually kind of going, take a deep breath and do a proper job. It's more likely to come up evenly. I don't know. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
I mean, I think into the wind, definitely. Not all, summits have a good range of options, but that's definitely one. Yeah. But then, if you've got a bit of flat to begin with, I wouldn't go off a cliff because you never know what's sort of happening down there, unless you're really confident you're going to be in the air when you hit the cliff. But then a slope which gives you enough of a slope that you're going to be able to pick up speed before you go down, but also enough of a slope that if you tripped up on the shrub that's at the top of it, you can kill the wing, roll down and get over it. And so it's trying to find that perfect mix of them. You can take off on just scree slopes where there isn't an option, but it's amazing how quickly the wind picks up and shoots forward. So it's just kind of being aware of that. Yeah,
that's probably a key point, actually, looking for somewhere that's going to give you like enough of a gradient that you can get pressure into the wing, but also is long enough that you can kill it if you need to. Leith Hill's quite a good example of that. There's a lot of spots on Leith Hill which are very, very flat. And there's one spot where there's quite a nice little launch and then it flattens out again about 20 metres below. And if you launch there and you don't get straight into your harness or you're a bit heavy on a brake, you'll find yourself touching down sort of 50 metres down the slope. So kind of, looking out for what's in front of you and having enough space to kill the wing. I did a hike and fly very early on. God, it must have been 6 months after my PG2, if that, off Shark's Tooth down in the Matuki. My wing was on a ridge, and the tips of my wing were probably a metre below the middle of the wing. The ridge was probably about this wide. 4 years later, a few years later, I'm just going, there is no way I should have launched on that spot, but I did it because I was naive, and luckily the wing came up. And we all do it, and that's kind of the point of trying to tell you about this now, is that there's a few options that maybe you better practice, and you might have a safer time with it.
Just remembering, we went up Mount Guy, was it last year or the year before, and there was a light thermal. There was no wind, but there was a light thermal, which we managed to launch into. Yeah,
so that can often happen. Like Saturday, it's probably a reasonable example of that lower down, is that if there's no wind and you're on a north-facing slope, there's a pretty good chance that there will be some light thermals or breeze coming up that slope. So if there's no wind and you're launching on a shady side of the hill, it's more likely to be katabatic. It might be a good reason to pick a site that's got more launch options in slightly different directions.
Just be doubly sure that those thermals are actually not rotated from the back.
Yeah,
I've had it happen at Mount Hutt actually.
Well, and we get it at the gondola as well. Don't we? You get the thermals triggering off the cliff just in front of gondola, and actually the air can be coming over the back, drawn into the thermal. Spectators, this is one of my concerns on some of these flights, and it's still quite unnerving up at gondola when you've got 30 or 40 people watching you launch. It's a whole lot easier launching when there's no one else around, because you can do your checks a lot at your own pace, and there's no pressure, and there's not kids asking you crazy questions about how awesome it is and how long you can stay up and all of that sort of stuff. Be polite. They will help, but a lot of the time they have no idea what they're doing. And so if you say, "Oh, can you just open the leading edge," or something that might seem pretty obvious to us, they won't have a clue what you're talking about. But a lot of the time they will be quite keen to help, and if you need a hand, great, get involved. Just be nice to them. And do your ground handling, because then it'll look cooler and you won't need so much help. So I asked, when I did this talk a couple of years ago, originally, and I kind of canvassed a load of people for what their top tips were. So go with someone else. If you're new, you're going to be the first person to launch, which means you need to be more comfortable with the landing, so make sure you check the landing out first. You should be the first person to launch. If you go with someone really experienced and they take you up to the top and then say, right, see you, bye, and leave you on the top, that's not actually much help. But they will be able to hopefully make some sensible choices on whether you should or shouldn't fly. And get photos of them. Just in case, make sure you saved enough energy to walk down. If you get up there and the wind is over the back, even if it's only like lightly on the back of your neck, you've got to run so fast to get the wing inflated. Like, it's just nuts.
Energy and time as well.
Yeah.
And try it. Go to a park, find the weather during wind is blowing.
Yeah,
Try it.
Yeah. Go to Taylor's, go to the landing field at Taylor's, and where they've got you kind of doing your practice inflations, go to the beach end and try and run back and see if you can get the wing in the air. Generally, the wind is going to be lighter earlier in the day, so especially in winter, early morning it's probably going to be katabatic, so it's going to be coming down the slope whilst the valley's in the shade. And in the afternoon, you're going to start to get a bit more of a sea breeze coming in. So generally, I don't know, James, you might be able to comment on this, but like hike and flies, I'd be aiming to take off late morning, like 10, 11, 12 o'clock. After that, it's more likely there'll be more wind. So, makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why the joy of it can be as well, going up and spending the night in a high hut or bivvying out up so that you can get a perfectly calm coming off.
Early morning launch,
if you're into bivvies or huts.
Bit
more weight.
It's that kind of like, people talk about where should we do our first vol biv, and it's kind of like, actually you should probably be looking at doing biv vols. Do the hike the night before with a nice calm forecast, fly off early in the morning. Calm autumn days, so yeah, we're at perfect time of year now before there's too much snow. Great time to go playing. Share your route, explain what you're intending to do. I have this agreement with my other half. She's very tolerant and now knows more about paragliding than she ever wanted to. If you are going to have someone keeping an eye on your track log, make sure it's someone who actually understands what they're looking at, like not your mum, another paraglider ideally. Be fit. I work on, I don't know who said that, wouldn't have been Louis. As a rough rule of thumb, Glenn does a lot of mountaineering. He'll probably have a really good idea on this one. So for height gain, if it's a reasonably flat route, I've got no idea how long it's going to take me, but if it's reasonably steep, I work on about 12 minutes, 100 metres for elevation gain. So 12 to 15. 15 is a fairly relaxed pace. 12 minutes is pretty full on, and I'm going to be pretty sweaty at the top. But having a pretty good, if you're doing a hike that's 800 metres of vert, make sure you've given yourself at least 2 hours to get up. That would be my rule of thumb. I don't know if you do you have a rule of thumb for?
Yeah, sort of 15 to 20 minutes for 100 metres, depending on the day.
Yeah.
Not too strenuous.
Yeah.
So you can go all day.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if you're only doing an hour and a half, 2 hour hike to a fly down, you can go pretty quick. But like, go do some walks with your kit. Get used to how long it takes you to walk up a certain amount of height, because it's remarkably consistent, whether it's stupidly steep or just moderately steep. It still takes about the same amount of time. Wear boots. I've broken my ankle with a shit landing. Check the forecast. So this is all stuff that other people have said, but it's pretty much we've already covered it to some extent. Make sure you look at the altitudes. Even windy's a pretty good tool for this kind of thing. But check at your launch height, check above your launch height, make sure it's not really, really windy. Find a good slope for launch and get the wing up easily into wind.
Hey, just a quick question on that. Assuming no wind launch, what would be your ideal kind of minimum?
4.5 degrees.
Because I was going on, like, you know, if you said a 5-to-1 gradient, right? You can stand there and kind of go, well, if I'm kind of 2 metres-ish and there's 10 metres across there, that's about right. You know, just to make sure you've kind of got enough to get off. Do you have a minimum, or do you just kind of know?
I think it's probably personal. Like, I've seen Ryan launch at the gondola doing forward launch along the path from where they've got the fence set up. And I like at the gondola, I want it to be fractionally steeper than it is, ideally. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. Go practice. Try it at Taylor's and work out what angle and length you need for yourself. I'm not sure. And Taylor's is a really good place to practice all this stuff. Like, yeah, go there when there's no wind and have to hike back, or park at the bottom, and then you walk up to start, and then you know you've always got to glide to the bottom. Pre-visualize your flight, anticipate issues, and plan what to do. So this doesn't stop when you get onto cross country either. Like for a hike and fly sleddy, you pretty much know where you're going to land. You've checked on hikeandfly.org that the glide angle is pretty low, and you can definitely get there. So you know where you're going to land. You're on launch. You know where you're going to launch. You can kind of go, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to head straight there. Or Leith Hill, nice hike and fly launch option in the Craigbones. You can go, well, actually, I've got enough height off Leith Hill that I can glide out and I can glide over Castle Hill Rocks and go and look at the rocks and then go to the landing. And if you find that you're over the rocks and you don't have enough glide, what's your alternative landing? Make sure you've got a plan. Oh yeah, I don't know who said this, but it's really good. Get to launch early and chill out there for a few minutes. Like it's sitting down for like 10 or 15 minutes. It's quite calming, but it also gives you time to like assess what the wind's doing and make sure that it is doing what you thought it was, and it wasn't just a lull while you were walking up. It does mean you have to carry more stuff, but you could maybe try and get someone else to carry that for you. But that kind of few minutes to calm down makes a huge difference to assessing the conditions. That was Louis. What he actually said was, make sure your will's up to date. But I didn't think that was appropriate to write on the slide. It's not. Okay. Be very wary if intending to top landing at mountain sites is not like Taylor's. I think that's probably less of a concern for hike and flies. We're mostly, at this time of year, we're mostly expecting to end up at the bottom. All right. Any questions so far?
Comments and a question.
Yes.
If you haven't, because this talk is intended for new pilots, haven't gone to any site since PD2 to do a sleddy, remember that your glide ratio is actually surprisingly long. Don't be like, oh, I'm about as high as I am at Taylor's to land at the bottom and just glide out, because you'll glide a lot further than you expected. Wind is wind versus no wind.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
And you're going to be landing faster because no wind.
Yeah, so
get trim speed.
That's it. So like when you are coming into land, make sure your hands are up and you're going as fast as you possibly can, because that will give you the maximum energy to do a flare on landing, which will slow it down more. If you're gradually on brakes going, shit, the ground's moving really fast, then when you get to the ground and touch down, there's nothing left to flare and slow you down.
And the question,
Good point.
you talked about autumn days, but what about winter? Snow?
Yeah, take sunglasses. Have you ever had arc eye? It's not pleasant. Winter's fine. Obviously winter's fine. Generally, try and avoid launching on snow. Snow will often cause katabatic wind breeze, so if there's no wind and you've got snow, there's more likely the air is going to be flowing down the snow rather than up it. And launching on snow is really hard because your wing will just skate around and slide off. We're going to talk about, I've got Mount Guy on here. There's a site on the other side of the valley from Mount Guy, Mount Harper. Beautiful hike, like really cool, brutally steep for the first section. And there's a lower launch at about the same height as Mount Guy. Quite nice. You can also walk all the way up to the top. It takes kind of a more northwesterly aspect. In winter, that's going to be snow, and it's reasonably flat. What time do you call this? But you can launch up there in winter on the snow. It's a flatter launch, so you can set up on the flat, and it gives you more space to run. I know some people have launched off Mount Plenty in the snow, and when it gets quite deep, there's a much higher chance of tripping over. So you might want to pack down effectively a runway so that you can launch and you're not trying to jump into 2 feet of snow. I've still never flown off Mount Hart, and I kind of really want to. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So what about snow pegs? Never used them, but they exist.
Never used them. Don't know.
Simon has a question.
Have you ever taken off on skis?
No. No, there's no, you have to talk to Anton about that. And the speedy guys.
Strangely enough, it's easy to take off downwind on skis. I'm kidding. I used to do tandems all the time. It's easier to take off downwind.
Do you still forward launch?
Yeah, forward launch fast.
Because you've got more forward speed.
Wind comes up.
So you do
up nicely.
Tandem on skis. So your passengers on skis as well?
Hopefully. Hopefully you put them in as well.
Yeah, maybe.
And
Yeah.
How you obviously land on snow?
Land on the snow, yeah. You can. I have landed on paddocks, grass paddocks at the right now, up on skis. We both on skis. You come to a fairly abrupt stop, but it's not unreasonable.
I'm not sure Mount Hart are super keen about people flying over the ski field these days.
No, not these days. I used to fly commercial tandems there all the time.
Yeah. And
it's very easy to take off. The best thing is really steep takeoff. You do it straight off a cat track or something like that. Very easy.
And it's straight in the air. Yeah. Cool.
What about crampon launches and landings? Is that a thing?
Yeah, I do. Spikes are kind of useful for that, rather than full crampons. But
I'd rather take them off. I think I'd rather take them off in the air with not having to land on them.
Yeah, it's tricky because you want that traction, especially if it's kind of crusty neve or something. You want the traction for the run and controlling the wing. I don't know. Go find out and tell me. You can do a talk on it next year.
Okay,
Oh, whatever. So,
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question. Going back to the instruments, if you don't have instruments, using your phone, how much of a bad idea is it?
No, it's fine. Yeah, if you've got XC track, as long as you've got some kind of barometer device in it and GPS. I use CE Navigator rather than XC track, but they're kind of same. And they'll give you if you're doing 360s, they'll give you an approximation of wind speed direction as well. For a short hike and fly, The other thing to bear in mind is that there's a pretty good chance, if it's like a 5 or 10 minute flight, there's a pretty good chance that the direction you launched in is the same direction you want to be landing in. If you launched into wind, it's very likely that at the bottom of the hill the wind's going in the same direction as it was at the top. Not guaranteed, but if you kind of find yourself facing the other way, it's like, am I really going into wind now? Because, yeah. Yeah, any kind of instrument. For a steady, it'll be fine. For a longer flight, maybe take a power bank as well. That's my main instrument, it's my phone. That and an XE tracer. So, we're putting some of these up on the website with some basic information. The information that I'm going to go through here and that's going to be on the website doesn't include weather. So all of these sites can be perfectly safe in benign conditions or horrendously bad places to launch if the wind's wrong. So if it's a nor'wester, we're not flying many places in Canterbury. If the wind's over the back, 30 k an hour, it's probably not a good idea to launch at any of these sites. I've graded them like ski runs. Hands up if you ski. Most people. So ski runs have generally 4 different grades, unless you're American. Green, blue, red, and black. And then off-piste. So I've tried to give some of these like grades based on ski run colour, and that's primarily around how easy the launch and the landing are, whether you can see the landing from the launch, that sort of thing. It's not necessarily about how easy the hike is or how long the hike is, but it's degree of how challenging it's going to be. So Leith Hill's one of our, it's a really nice hike and fly site. It's a rounded top. You can launch in most directions. That's the top of Leith Hill here. This is Castle Hill Village. It's a bit blown out on the screen, sorry. It's quite a steep track. You head out of the village, get out of the tree line, and then basically hang a right and go straight up the screen to the top of the hill. But once you get there, reasonably flat top, even with a bit of snow around, it's kind of nice. And you can glide back down to the golf course just here, or down to the just past the car park, Castle Hill Rocks. This whole area around here is a no landing option, the Castle Hill Station, so they're pretty sensitive about that. But it's a good option for picking a launch that is nicely into wind in light conditions. That gives you a route back to the golf course. The golf course is a really big open area. If it's nice and sunny and kind of buoyant, you can fly out over the Hog's Back. There's a good chance that you'll get light thermals coming off that as well to try doing some 360s and extend your flight. It's a moderate hike. Couple of alternatives nearby. You can hike up Longspur, which is our one of our frequent cross-country launches in summer. So the Longspur track heads up here and then up Longspur to point back here somewhere. This is the launch for that. I think it's fractionally lower than Leith Hill at the top of Longspur. Close enough.
You can keep walking up Longspur until you get to Mount Cloudesley. So
yeah, and there is actually a really nice launch. So there's one little open scree patch, which is where we normally launch. If you walk another sort of 10 or 15 minutes, there's actually a nicer launch on some tussock, a little bit higher. But it's further walking, so we don't generally go there. The other option is Mount Plenty. The Speedfly guys all know Mount Plenty. It's on the other side of the valley. A little bit lower, shorter, more direct hike. Launch is kind of north to west directions, and it's a little bit steeper than Leith Hill, so you get in the air a little bit easier, but there's plenty of space to set up. So if you've done one of those, go do the other ones.
Can you show again how to get to that Leaf Hill launch? Is there essentially you want to take the track, but then is there further directions on the website? Is it
So on the website, what we're gonna there's GPS coordinates for the track head, the launch, and for the LZ as well. If you follow this, so you walk around Trilisic Loop to a point about here, then follow this track out. Once you get to Crikey, where's the summit there? Yeah, up to here, and then you just go straight up.
okay?
Most.
You can go past the car park and leave cars.
And walk up from the lodge.
And, yeah, going down.
Yeah, so you can. So we often park here, and you can just walk up past the lodge and join that track there.
But there's no access issues or any, because that's all public land. Right?
Yeah, that's all public. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just some sensitive landing areas. So from there, really, you're aiming for the golf course. That's which is just the other side of the road, the main road there. Yeah.
Well, yes, going back to the website, the plan is for that to be a bit of a collaborative effort. So I think I have a GPX log of me walking up there. We can use that, or if anyone else has any pictures or data, then I can.
Yeah.
It's really not that hard to find if you've been outside once or twice.
You can see the hill. You can be like, that's
The
the
hardest
hill,
thing.
go up. You just turn right.
Yeah, the hardest bit for me is always like when I get to this junction here, working out whether I need to turn left or right. But because you're still in the trees at that point. But yeah, it's pretty obvious, and it is a nice open launch area, easy to set up, lots of space. Mount Guy. This is the other one that I would strongly recommend if you've not flown this. Biggest issue with Mount Guy is this is in Ashburton Lakes, and I can show you on top of the map afterwards roughly where these places are. So the Ashburton Lakes have can often get quite a lot of wind blowing through the valley there. So making sure that it is a calm forecast to go fly there is really useful. You'll either get a nor'wester spilling over the main divide and rushing through Lake Clearwater, or you get the sea breeze pushing in and it funnels up this road here. In light winds though, the LZ is probably a couple of 100 square kilometres. You can pretty much land anywhere you like. It's one massive flat valley. The launch, often we're launching this way, which is kind of into a bit of sun, light thermals, a little bit of breeze coming up, and then you just fly it around the corner here and back down to the car, which will be somewhere over here. I've launched on both sides of the hill. The only direction that is awkward is that nor'westerly breeze. That can be a little bit awkward because you're effectively running along the ridge, and it's pretty flat on the top. It's a nice one. There's a free campground down here, down at Lake Camp. So you can camp up there the night before, have a few drinks, have fire, and then go for a hike and fly in the morning. The other options, Mount Harper that I mentioned. So Mount Harper is up here, much bigger. It's another 500 metres on top of Mount Guy, but there is a lower launch, about 1,300 as well. And so, unsurprisingly, being on the other side of the valley, the wind direction needs to be more northerly for there, whereas Mount Guy it'll cope with southeast or north. If you've got a westerly wind on Mount Harper and you end up launching due west, you might end up in the wrong river valley, and then it's a sort of 150k round trip to get back to the car. And that's a good one. And Mount Barossa, which I think is often used by the speed flyers, that's a little bit back down the road. It's closer to the neck, the entrance to the Ashburton Lakes Valley. So again, you tend to get a bit more wind through there, so that's generally a fly earlier option. But those two are both pretty easy, lots of open space to land in, fairly easy places to set up. The only other thing about Mount Guy is the track is properly in the shade, so in the middle of winter it can be kind of icy on the track on the way up. Mount Herbert, our local hike and fly. How are we doing with time? 8 o'clock, sweet. It's a bit of a longer walk than I sort of thought it was the first time I did it. So, where are we? Where's Mount Herbert? It's here. We're hiking up from Orton Bradley Park, which is here, and you take the walkway up to the top. The shortest walk is actually to park up at the top, up at the monument over here, and walk along the top to it, but then you've got a car shuttle run to try and do to get back to it. Launch at the top, it's pretty flat. It's got a reasonably long glide out, back out to the coast at Orton Bradley. Probably one to go with someone locally or take a group. But that's kind of a fun local hike and fly.
Southeasterly is pretty much
Yeah, that's it. You can glide down to Purau as well and land on the beach. There's not much beach at high tide.
James, on top of that, on Mount Herbert, you said it was flat. It's quite flat. And last time I was there, maybe 5 months ago, it was very gorsy.
Yeah, there's a lot of gorse.
There is, like, if you continue going east and then down, there's like a spur that you can prominently see from the top of Mount Herbert. It's pretty nice.
And you can launch on that, yes.
Like westerly, not westerly direction.
Yeah, you totally can, and that actually reduces the glide that you need to get to the LZ as well. Yep. Beeley Spur. So this is past Arthur's Pass on the way to, past Castle Hill on the way to Arthur's Pass. It's a really nice walk. It's not very hard walk. And in light winds, it's a pretty easy glide, either back along the spur or down to Klondike Corner and the bridge just down there. Quite nice. It's on the Waimak, so you have to watch out a little bit for sea breeze and winds pushing in. But that's quite a nice one. And Mount Bruce, which is, I think, this is the Mount Bruce track. So just off the bottom of the screen is Mount Bruce. That's another really nice spot to hike and fly. Similar launch directions and really quite pleasant launches up there. Effectively, for Mount Bruce, you pop out of the trees, walk about 100 metres, and then turn left and head up the hill to the ridgeline.
Where do you land from Mount Bruce? Same place?
You can land by the car. It's farmland, so it's there's a paddock next to the car park. Obviously, if there's stock in there, that's a no-go. Or you push out to the fields the other side of the main road. And the river flats aren't too bad to land in either. There's bits of Madagascar and stuff.
Be careful of the wind coming down Waimak and from Arthur's Pass.
Yeah.
The sea breeze just spills over there and accelerates through the narrow.
Yeah, it's very much a go when it's light, reassess the wind on the walk up. You're reasonably exposed to the wind, but once you get a little bit higher, the breeze in the valley at the valley floor will be a lot stronger than what you're feeling on the face. Woolshed Hill, also in the Waimak on the other side. So Woolshed Hill's just here. This is a stunning walk. This is really, really cool if you haven't done it. It's absolutely brutally steep to about here, through the trees, and then you pop out of the trees and it's this really cool little ridgeline arete all the way up to the summit. The summit is tussock. It's pretty steep short launch, and you're launching south back down to the big river flats at the Horden campsite. The river valley's pretty huge there again, but it's the Waimak, so it can get kind of windy. Shorter launch, need to be a little more on point with your ground handling. And then I've added a couple more just because those are the ones that I would recommend. But there's a couple that people talk about a lot of going to fly. Mount Fife up in Kaikoura. Mount Fife's a really steep walk, well, really long walk. It's four-wheel drive track. So this one's red. I've classed this one as red. The launch isn't too bad. The landing's not too bad, but it's very affected by sea breeze and the wind because it's right on the coast. If you've got a really calm day, it'll be really nice flight up there, and you can land back down at the car down here and just basically follow the ridgeline along, or you can go out and glide and push all the way out to the coast. If you do, don't go to Kaikoura because Kaikoura is in airspace, but you can land. You can push all the way out to the coast there.
So do you want to do this one? Because I'm going up to Kaikoura next week. So this would be an option. But do you want to do it before the sea breeze kicks in?
Yeah, you need it to be light winds.
Yeah.
So
really hot up there. So if you want to stay the night.
Yeah, you can stay in. You can also hire a helicopter if you like.
Probably good at it.
Yeah, check on the wind directions. Check the wind at altitude as well, because you are going up from sea level to 1,600 meters. So it's the wind is going to be more like the synoptic wind at launch.
Yeah.
It is possible to launch northwest or west and then fly back over the ridge, but that needs to be really light winds so that you're not flying into rotor.
Yeah. So something you could almost saw this on the sea breeze, but
you probably can. Well, you probably can. It's a very, very steep mountain face and then it's just flats to the sea. So yeah, you can. It's not the kind of place that I would really be treating it like Taylor's.
Yeah, right.
You bomb out of it, if you get blown over the back, like if you saw it and get above ridge height and you push slightly behind the ridge, you may not make it back in front of the ridge. And
ridge soaring in the mountains is generally a poor idea.
Yeah, generally not a great move.
Yeah. I was up there recently, and the eastern side, there are pine trees growing, and they're getting quite high, which makes launching difficult. But also that side is incredibly steep, scree gullies and rocky gullies. So there's no turning back. It's very committing.
Yeah, you don't have a lot of aborting launch options there. Yeah, yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's a pretty committing site. The landings are great. The flight is lovely because you're instantly so high above the ground. But yeah, it's a pretty committing place to be, and the winds can be a lot stronger than is forecast.
In terms of commitment, it's also a big walk and a big drive, so you'll find yourself on top trying to make it launchable, even though it's really not.
Yeah. So this kind of comes back to what we were talking about at the start of the talk, with we're trying to launch generally for a winter hike and fly sleddy type flight. We're going to try and launch as early as we can before that wind picks up. If you're quick, fine, but if you take 4 hours over the hike, you need to be leaving really bright and early, 7 o'clock, to be starting the hike, to be up there without feeling rushed. And you don't want to get up there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and discover it's too windy and then walk back down again.
Yeah, it's going to suck. Right?
It's pretty committing, which is why I've kind of coloured it in red.
Yeah. Is there a lot of traffic on the four-wheel drive track? No. Okay.
There'll be a few hikers.
A lot of people
It's not really accessible for vehicles, but it is a four-wheel drive track.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Can you launch lower? Or do you really have to go?
Not really, you're in the trees. Yeah, there's not a lot of launch. You can launch by the hut. I know a few people who have, but the hut is basically flat and then pine trees and a cliff. So you're launching on the flat to get your wing up into the air. And we didn't really talk about this, but if you're on a cliff edge, often just behind the cliff edge, there'll be no wind at all because the wind's coming up and you're actually in a rotor turbulence only. Talking about pendoves earlier, it's exactly that kind of situation. So launching on very flat areas can be more challenging.
Also, the hut is only a couple hundred meters below the summit, so you're probably already committed to 1,000 meters of road at that point.
Oh yeah, and more than that. Oh no, it's 1,100, isn't it? Yeah, so about 1,000 to the hut. But if you are lucky enough to get to glide into airspace, good luck, just don't log your flight. And the last one that everyone talks about, I'm considering this one a black run. Obviously there's oars category or off-piste runs, whatever you want to call it. Avalanche Peak, it's pretty stunning, and again the speedies fly this one quite a lot, like Mount Rolleston, but they are flying early in the morning. Same kind of deal here. You're flying into a really steep valley with power lines, phone lines, railway lines. You're landing on the edge of a car park, probably. You can land. I guess there's a few landings further down the valley that you can land in, but it's a pretty committing spot to land in. The launches are okay. I mean, there's launches sort of on either side of the track, depending on where the breeze is coming from, into this bowl here. North of Scott's Track is pretty steep. Anyone who's been up there, it's pretty rugged terrain. You can launch on the top. I probably couldn't get my wing to launch off the top, but if you've got it's been done. But you certainly want to be pretty confident with getting a lightweight wing up really quickly. And there's no run at the top, you're just stepping off the edge. So I would have reservations about recommending Avalanche Peak to lower airtime pilots as a place. Go to the other ones first and get comfortable with those, try the other local options. And yeah, once you've been up there and if you've been up there and driven through Arthur's Pass, you know how steep the terrain is through there and how many trees there are. So it's a pretty narrow gully. And that's it. Lots of people gave me thoughts and input onto this when I asked a couple of years ago. So I just want to say a huge thanks to everyone for all of their input. Hopefully this will help you keep a bit safer, and we'll get stuff up on the website in the next few days or the next week or two.
Thanks for the timeline.
Yeah, no worries. But it is.
Have you got any sites that you fly around Hanmer?
Mount Isabel's the standard one there.
Two beats just south of Tennessee, facing north are pretty good. If you want to be careful of the wind coming down the lake, but you see it on the lake.
Yeah.
And you can fly from Amory Ski Field, face down, go north from the building. That's pretty much.
There's quite a few launches on Isabel. Like as you're walking along, just kind of keep an eye out. It's mostly scree, a few little bits of scrub and wilding pines to avoid. But like, get up to the top, see what the wind's doing when you get up there. You're generally going to be aiming for a light southerly, so that you're launching towards Hanmer rather than into the arse end of nowhere.
Make sure for Isabel it's dying southerly.
Yeah.
Post frontal, or non-frontal at all. Definitely on the side and decreasing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. I was looking back at when we did, Andrea and I took a bunch of people up to Mount Guy a couple of winters ago, years ago, for a hike and fly there, and I was looking at I took some screenshots of the windy forecast for the area, and the whole area was just this purple colour. It was 1 to 2 km/h winds forecast, and that's perfect. And if I kind of flick back to what we were looking at, so this is the forecast. That was the forecast for Canterbury for Saturday yesterday, which actually looked pretty good. And then I looked again this evening, and it's actually pretty windy. This is just ground level, and there are places that you could make it work, but this is getting into that kind of doggy-door concept of, oh, maybe we can do a flight here, as long as we're in the air by 12 o'clock, and it starts. Every time you do that, you're cutting a margin. You're kind of going, okay, I'm taking a little bit more risk on the weather, or I'm taking a little bit more risk on the wind strength, and just trying to moderate that as much as you can, give yourself the best opportunity. So very light winds, up at altitude as well, makes everything a lot safer. And that was it. That's it. Any more questions?
Yeah, just quickly with the, I think you briefly looked at it before, but sort of determine if there's going to be really low cloud in the valley. Is there a sort of way to sort of...
Low cloud's harder.
Yeah.
So low cloud. So you look for low cloud. You're looking for inversions and significant temperature differences overnight. So if you have really cold nights, you're more likely to get cloud in the morning, which will take a bit of time to burn off. I don't know if it'll show up on like a RASP or anything like that.
There's a low cloud forecast on windy.
Yeah, but the low cloud counts as cumulus. That's below 4,000 metres. I think low cloud, we're talking like fog, effectively, aren't you? So that's morning inversion.
You might be
It's
able
got
to
to burn off.
see the inversion in sky side, but last but really high resolution for it. And it's probably not in the spot where you want to go for high.
Yeah. Generally, if you've picked a day that is showing, like if it's yellow on windy, so it's like no cloud and really light winds, and you get there and it's cloudy, there's a pretty good chance it's a cold weather inversion, and once the sun heats the ground up a bit, it's going to burn off.
Good thing about that cloud means there's not much wind around, so
Yeah.
you can't wait it out. The wind will shift at the rates. Normally, fine.
Ugh.
It gets
What the hell is that?
shredded by wind, things quite uncomfortable.
Sorry, I was going to try and duplicate screen and show you the sky side. But now I can't find this monitor. So if we go for surface wind, SkySight's showing that same kind of convergence line. So I just flick to the convergence plot. So if this is clicking through on half an hour, right? So that's Cheeseman there and Mount Hutt down here, and you'll see this kind of this band of convergence setting up along the edge of the hills. So when you're in that, and actually, as we were saying earlier, you can actually watch the sea breeze push it gradually further inland.
Can you change it to the topo map and lower the contrast of the...
Sure. I'm not sure I can. Where's the contrast?
Settings now.
Oh, really? So that convergence is going to feel like really light winds, and it's actually stronger winds. Though Saturday on across the plains here, it's only showing like 5 knots. But we've already seen Windy's forecast changed from yesterday to today. It's gone up by sort of 8 to 10k an hour. So this would be one of those days where I'm kind of paying a lot more attention to it, and I'd have to really want to go and hike up a really big hill just to take a chance. There is this this is surface wind, fairly calm bowl in the Craigie Burns as we go through the day. But it's not as awesome a day as it probably was showing yesterday. If we go up to wind at ridge height, we've got actually reasonably light winds forecast on ridge height, so this would be potential for Mount Plenty or Leith Hill. Cutting through the valley here, though, we're seeing 10 knots, which Windy was showing as well. That wind funneling through the valley past Mount Hutt. If we zoom right out and have a look up here. Surface wind at, where's Mount Isabel? There. Pretty light winds on the face at Mount Isabel at 1:30. Veering, can't remember which way around it is, coming around towards the west a bit more. But that's a little light pocket around Hanmer on Saturday. And wind 1800. Again, pretty light winds at Mount Isabel, so that's not a terrible option as well. Have to check the cloud. Lots of wind around though, but we're in this. There is this little band on the edge of the foothills of lighter wind. Have we eaten all the pizza? Did you guys manage?
Still a few bits left.
Cool. I hope that was useful.
Very good.
Try and get some. So if anyone's done hike and flies on nice, approachable peaks, then please get in touch. We can use everyone else's resources to add a few nice stuff onto the website. But the website's primarily going to be more conservative sites for newer pilots and visiting pilots. For those of us who've done a lot and have a bit more experience, then you'll work it out for yourselves. That's fine.
One more question.
Yeah.
For all these sites, especially the green and blue ones, do you have any particular warnings or reservations for A-rated wings, or is all okay?
The rating of your wing shouldn't make any odds for these hike and fly sites. The wind strength will do, and that's a factor of the day. So yeah, again, your glide is not going to be as good. So there's a hikeandfly.org website, which has got a really good topo map. You can click on a point and it will show you how far you can get at a certain glide angle. So have a play with that. Have a look at these sites and look at where you've got to. Mount Guy is a great option because you can land at the very foot of the hill and it's reasonably steep. It's a rounded off top, but it steepens up and then it's just flat across the bottom. So you will easily make it to a nice landing field from there. That's a good one to start with.
An important bit rather than your wings rating is to realise that hike and fly actually sits pretty high up there on the scale of
Come around to the front.
skills that you need. So if you talk to a lot of experienced pilots, they'll tell you that bivy flying is up there where you land somewhere and then you need to take off from the same spot you're assessing it from the air. You're probably landing high up on the mountain and then you're probably going to try to take off from the same spot. Hike and fly just has the one thing that you can walk up and you can assess the conditions at the bottom, at the top. But you will be probably in foreign territory for you if it's your first time. Right. So relying on your wings safety or on your wings rating or certification shouldn't really be a thing.
Yeah. I mean, one of the most prolific hike and fly pilots around here would be Lorraine. She's on a low B and she's flown pretty much every peak that you can actually get a wing up. She's flown off Tappy. She flew off, was it Mount Thomas the other day when she actually had to put her wing on top of the scrub, when she's like balancing it on top of like 3-4 foot bushes to get it in the air because there is nothing else to launch off now up there. She's not on a hot wing. Being good with your ground handling, like I said, and being confident that your wing is inflated when you launch, that's far more important. Yeah. And then a wing will do what, 7, 8 to 1 in 7 to 1 on a nil wind day.
That's the important bit, the nil wind. If you go from Leith Hill and you have easterly, you kind of touch and go to make it into the golf course, pushing into wind the whole way. Same with Mount Oxford, someone's recently done it. A lot of trees, if you go into wind, your glide is suddenly not 6 to 1, it's 4 to 1.
Yeah, or
it's not going to be pleasant flight.
And that's it. And that's probably a concern or a consideration for winter and when you're launching is if you fly. You've waited at launch until it's nice and warm and you fly over a big shady cold valley, the air over that bit of valley is likely to be sinking, so you might find your glide is not as good as you originally thought, but it's the A versus B versus C, wouldn't worry about it. Have a look on the hike and fly. If it's saying that you've got 5 to 1, I'd be reasonably confident on a hike and fly that I'm going to make 5 to 1 on my low B in light winds.
The factors that I think are important if you're trying to do your earlier hike and flies is know your limits and ideally go with someone who's done the site and knows your limits, or your flying ability and ground handling ability. Makes things a lot easier for everyone to judge if you should take off or not.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's that kind of the tricky balance between sort of you're the pilot in charge, but if you really don't know a lot and you've only got 5 hours experience, then actually going with someone who does have just don't go.
Don't go. 5 hours with someone who just finished 22. Just do yourself a favor, don't go.
Good. Now we can stay around and chat. Feel free to finish off the pizza or anything else and ask James any more questions. But just want to make sure we said thank you to James for his presentation. Thank you for doing the videoing and Theo for getting that up on the website. It's been a really good development to make all of these talks available to those that couldn't make it for each of the evenings, and it provides a really good resource for us. So thank you for coming in, and thank you, James.
And thank you for bringing the pizza.
Very good.